All right, ready to jump into another deep dive. Today, we're looking at WPIL Limited.
WPIL Limited.
Yeah, they specialize in pumps and pumping systems.
Pumps, huh? Interesting.
Not exactly a glamorous industry, but super essential. Think about it. The water we drink, the oil that fuels our cars, all that. Pumps are a vital part of it all.
Okay, I see, yeah.
For this deep dive, we've got their FY24 annual report, financial statements, audit reports, even some stuff on their corporate governance. Should be interesting.
Sounds pretty comprehensive.
And of course, I've got an expert with us to help us unpack it all. Someone who can, make sense of all the financial jargon. Welcome.
Happy to be here. Glad to lend my expertise.
So let's get down to it. What exactly does WPIL Limited do?
Right to the point. I like it.
Their annual report says they design, manufacture, erect, commission, A&D service pumps and pumping systems. Quite a mouthful.
It is, yeah. But it basically covers the entire life cycle of a pump. From the drawing board to installation and maintenance, they're a one-stop shop for all things pumps.
So like not just making the pumps, but also setting them up and making sure they keep running smoothly.
Exactly. And it's not just one type of pump either.
Oh, different types for different things, I imagine.
Precisely. They manufacture a whole range, each tailored to specific industries and uses. Horizontal split-case pumps, vertical turbine pumps, inline pumps, the list goes on.
Wow, so a pump needed for, say, an oil rig would be completely different from one used in a water treatment plant.
Absolutely. Different applications, different requirements.
Makes sense. The report actually mentions a specific pump, the 36W LN33B, which they developed for an oil and gas client.
Oh, yeah, that one's a beast. Designed for high-pressure, high-volume applications.
So their clientele is pretty diverse then.
Very much so. They serve a wide range of sectors: water management, power generation, oil and gas, you name it.
It's amazing how pumps are involved in so many different industries.
Absolutely. They're kind of the unsung heroes of the modern world.
Okay, so their business model seems pretty solid. But what about the bigger picture? How's the pump manufacturing industry doing these days?
Overall, it's a growing market. Lots of factors driving it, but one of the biggest is global infrastructure development, especially in emerging economies. As these economies grow, they need more and more pumps for everything, from water systems to industrial processes.
Right, so as the world develops, the demand for pumps goes up.
Exactly. And that's good news for companies like WPIL.
So where do they fit into all of this? What's their market share like?
Well, the report doesn't give us a precise number for their market share, but they highlight their competitive advantages.
Advantages like what? What makes them stand out?
One thing that really jumps out is their focus on research and development. Specifically, they're investing heavily in an area called computational fluid dynamics, or CFD.
CFD. Sounds pretty high-tech.
It is. Basically, it's advanced computer simulation technology that lets them analyze and optimize pump designs before they even build them.
So they're not just relying on old designs, but actually pushing the boundaries.
Exactly. They're innovating, trying to improve performance and efficiency. The report mentions they use CFD to develop new high-efficiency vertical turbine pumps at their plant in Panahati. Pretty impressive stuff.
Wow, so R&D is a big differentiator for them?
Yeah.
What else helps them stand out?
Well, for one, their global reach is a major factor. They have 12 locations across India and 14 internationally. That gives them a real advantage in terms of logistics and being close to their customers.
Makes sense, being where the action is.
Exactly. And on top of that, they really emphasize building strong customer relationships and providing top-notch after-sales service. That helps build loyalty and keep customers coming back.
Happy customers, happy business.
Couldn't agree more.
But, every business has its risks. What are some of the key risks WPIL outlines in their annual report? I was going to look at both sides of the coin.
Right, for sure. Well, one big one they highlight is geopolitical risks. Things like trade wars, political instability in certain regions, and the push for localization, all that.
Yeah, those are definitely factors in today's world.
They are. These things can disrupt global supply chains and make it harder to do business in certain markets, which impacts companies like WPIL who operate globally.
So they're keeping an eye on those global trends. What else?
They also point to the changing energy landscape as a potential challenge, the shift away from fossil fuels and the push for renewables, all that.
Makes sense. The world energy mix is definitely evolving.
It is. And that could impact demand for certain types of pumps. So they have to be adaptable and strategic in how they respond to that.
Always got to be ready to adjust. Anything specific the auditors raised concerns about?
Actually, yeah. The auditors did flag some issues with revenue recognition on projects, specifically how WPIL was recording revenue and valuing their assets. Seemed to be some inconsistencies there.
Oh, so a bit of a red flag in terms of their accounting practices.
It's something they need to address, for sure. The auditors recommended they tighten up their internal controls to ensure their revenue recognition practices are in line with accounting standards.
Yeah, got to make sure everything's above board.
Absolutely. Transparency is key.
So it seems like WPIL has a solid business model and a lot going for them.
They do.
But they also need to pay close attention to these risk factors and make sure their internal processes are, buttoned up.
Definitely. Risk management and good governance are crucial for any company, especially one operating on a global scale like WPIL.
Right. And speaking of governance, let's move on to that next. It's an important area, even if it's not the most exciting part of the report.
Agreed. But you'd be surprised what you can find buried in those governance details sometimes. It can be quite revealing.
All right, well, let's dig in and see what we can uncover.
Let's do it. Now, when it comes to corporate governance, I was actually quite impressed with what I saw in WPIL's report.
Really? That's not usually the most thrilling section to dive into.
True, but it's so important, and WPIL seems to be taking it seriously.
Okay, good to hear.
Yeah, for starters, their board has 50% independent directors.
Independent directors, so that means.
It's a good sign of objectivity, making sure there's no funny business going on.
Right. Keeping things transparent.
Exactly. Plus, they have a woman independent director, which is always good to see.
Absolutely. It's 2024. Diversity at the top should be the norm, not the exception.
Couldn't agree more. And they've also got a strong ethics and compliance framework in place. Code of conduct, whistleblower policy, a really robust anti-bribery and corruption policy.
Wow, they've really covered all the bases.
It seems so. They even have an active risk management committee that oversees all these areas and reports directly to the board.
So it's not just lip service. They're actually putting these policies into practice.
It certainly appears that way.
Okay, so they're ticking all the boxes on governance and ethics. That's great. But let's circle back to something we touched on earlier.
Oh, you mean?
That diesel generator they converted to run partially on natural gas. What else are they doing on the sustainability front? I'm curious to see what else they've got going on.
Well, their BRS report actually gives us a ton of information on that.
Oh, perfect.
It highlights their environmental management system. They've even achieved ISO 1401 certification.
ISO 1401.
Yeah, it's kind of a big deal. It's an internationally recognized standard for environmental management.
So it basically means...
It means they have a systematic approach to minimizing their environmental impact and are committed to continuous improvement. They're not just doing the bare minimum.
Gotcha. So they're going above and beyond. What else are they doing?
They've also implemented some really solid waste management practices, big emphasis on responsible disposal and recycling.
It's all about that circular economy, right?
Right.
Reduce, reuse, recycle.
Exactly. And they've got a number of projects in the works aimed at further reducing their carbon footprint. They're really thinking long term.
That's good to see. It seems like they're recognizing that sustainability isn't just a nice to have anymore.
It's a must-have. It's becoming a core business imperative.
Especially for companies that want to attract investors who are increasingly focused on those ESG factors, environmental, social, and governance.
Absolutely. It's a smart move from a business perspective, too.
All right, so we've covered their business model, their commitment to sustainability, and their strong corporate governance practices. What's next for WPIL? What does their growth trajectory look like?
Well, the annual report paints a pretty optimistic picture.
Okay, let's hear it.
Their financial performance has been really strong. Consistent revenue growth, healthy profit margins. They're doing well.
Those are good signs.
They are. And they're strategically positioned in a growing market. Remember all that infrastructure development we talk about? That's only going to increase demand for pumps.
Right, and especially in those rapidly developing economies.
Precisely. And their investments in R&D, especially those advancements in CFD, are likely to give them a real competitive edge. They're not just keeping up, they're pushing boundaries.
So it's all smooth sailing ahead for WPIL. No potential storms on the horizon.
Well, we did talk about those geopolitical risks earlier. Those are definitely something they need to stay on top of. The global landscape can be unpredictable, and they need to be agile.
Be prepared for anything.
Exactly. And the energy transition, the shift towards renewables, is going to require them to be strategic. Think about the types of pumps they develop and the sectors they target.
It's all about adapting and evolving with the market.
It is. But based on their track record, I think they're well equipped to navigate these challenges. They don't seem afraid of change.
Speaking of change, any exciting developments in their business recently? Any major moves or announcements, acquisitions, mergers?
Not any big mergers or acquisitions that I'm aware of.
What?
But they have been securing some major new contracts, especially in the water management sector.
Tapping into that growing demand we talked about.
Exactly. And they're actively exploring new markets as well, which indicates a forward-thinking approach.
So they're not just resting on their laurels. They're actively looking for ways to grow and expand.
That's right. They're not standing still.
Okay, before we move on, there's one thing I want to circle back to, something the auditors mentioned.
What's that?
A fraudulent bank transfer. That sounds a bit worrying. Can you tell us a bit more about what happened there?
Yes, this was a concerning incident highlighted in the audit report. It appears that WPIL was targeted by a sophisticated phishing scam, led to an unauthorized transfer of funds.
Oh, wow. So they were victims of cybercrime.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
But luckily, they were able to recover a significant portion of the stolen money.
So they dodged a bullet, but it was a close call.
It was. It really underscores the importance of cybersecurity, especially for a company operating globally like WPIL.
Right. With operations in so many different countries, they're a bigger target.
Exactly. They've since implemented additional security protocols to prevent anything like that from happening again.
That's reassuring. Cybersecurity is a concern for every company these days.
It really is. It's a constant battle.
So, just to recap what we've learned about WPIL Limited today. They're a major player in the pump manufacturing sector. They have a diverse range of products and a global customer base.
And their strengths lie in their R&D capabilities, their commitment to sustainability, and those strong corporate governance practices we talked about.
Plus, they've shown a real willingness to adapt and evolve, which is crucial in today's fast-paced business world.
Absolutely. They seem to understand that change is constant, and they're embracing it.
That, of course, they're not without their challenges. They need to keep a close eye on those geopolitical risks, adapt to the energy transition, and stay one step ahead when it comes to cybersecurity.
Agreed. It's a lot to juggle.
But overall, it seems like they're a company to watch, with a lot of potential for continued growth and success.
I think so, too. They've laid a solid foundation and seem to have a clear vision for the future.
Well, that was quite a deep dive into WPIL Limited.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there.
For sure, for sure. What really stood out to you about their approach, I mean?
I think for me, it's that blend of deep engineering know-how and that customer-focused mindset, you know? They're not just churning out pumps. They're really trying to solve problems.
Yeah, and that seems to be working for them. But what about, I'm also curious about all their sustainability stuff. How do they stack up against other companies in the same space?
That's a good question. It's tricky to compare sometimes. Every company reports things a little differently. But from what I've seen, WPIL is definitely ahead of the game. That ISO 14001 certification, that's a pretty big deal.
Right. Shows they're serious.
Yeah. And all those steps they're taking, like converting that diesel generator, it's not just talk,
Actions speak louder than words.
Exactly. They're walking the walk. I think that sends a strong signal, to their customers, investors, employees.
That they're committed.
Exactly. And that's becoming more and more important these days.
Yeah, it's not just a nice to have anymore. It's a must-have for companies that want to stay competitive, I mean.
Couldn't agree more. Customers they're paying attention, and investors they're definitely looking at those ESG factors.
Right. Well, on that note, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. We've seen that WPIL is at this interesting point, right? They're navigating this complex global landscape. They're investing in growth. But will those bets pay off? The ones on R&D and sustainability.
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But I'm optimistic, I think. They seem to have a good grasp of the challenges ahead, and they're not afraid to adapt. And they've built a strong foundation,
And they're in a sector that's so vital, right, to so much modern life. The world needs pumps, and WPIL seems ready to meet that need.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do next, for sure.
Definitely. Keep an eye on WPIL Limited, folks. Their story's not over yet. And thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.